there is a lot of work on the planet that we can be doing, that if we were really in our passions, we would connect to our passions and really enjoy that work. And then there's other work that we often are doing that we don't really like at all, and therefore is not a part of our passion at all. Yeah. And we need to allow ourselves to feel our emotions about our passions and desires. So that's the second point that I'd like to raise with you. The second point is to actually find out whether something is a passion or a desire. You need to be able to feel your own emotions about what you're doing. Not somebody else's emotions, but your own emotions about what you're doing. Does that make sense? Now, there will be times, no matter what you're doing, that you feel bad or sad or you don't have a passion for it. Under those circumstances, there is always an emotional reason why. Now, sometimes that emotional reason will be because your addiction is not getting met and you want it met. And so then you feel bad when it's not met. Other times, it will mean that you're doing a job that is not your passion at all. So the first thing that I do whenever I'm doing something is I feel myself, and if I feel like I am feeling sad or feeling frustrated or upset in any way or annoyed in any way, then I stop what I'm doing and I ask myself whether what I'm doing is the result of a true desire, or am I just doing it for the purpose of other reasons, like pleasing people or providing something to other people that I don't want to be doing myself. So for that reason, I very rarely answer emails anymore, because I don't enjoy sitting down at the computer typing text to another person. I would much prefer to phone them, at least, and have a personal interaction with them. And in fact, I find email very frustrating unless there is actually, details or text that you need to give the other person for details of where to meet or something like that, something basic like that. Now, I get literally hundreds of emails. We get hundreds of emails in 1 week asking a lot of questions about emotions. Now, I find it totally impossible to help a person via email with their emotions, because most of the time they're skipping over the very emotion while they're reading the email that I need to address with them. And so, personally, when I get an email, if it's just to do with facts or figures, as Joy knows, then I quickly send off a fact or figure back and it's done. Right? And I quite like that kind of an email. But if somebody emails me questions, then I feel quite strongly that the best use of my time is that I have a personal interaction with them about that question. And so when it comes to emails, I sit down, I get the email and I go, I don't want to respond to that email, and so I don't. Right? Now, if I did, that would indicate immediately that I'd be trying to overcome my own emotions of frustration or annoyance or even just a waste of time type emotions in order to do that particular thing. And if I'm trying to overcome those emotions, then it indicates immediately that I must have an ulterior motive for doing so, whatever that motive is. So for me, I would rather have a personal conversation with a person than have an email exchange with them. And so when people email me with asking questions, it's very rare for me to respond to those emails because I don't like sitting in front of the computer answering emails. It's a very slow time waster, like a large time waster, but it's also very slow in terms of its response for me. I'd much rather talk to the person. So if the person doesn't give me their phone number, then I won't call them and I won't respond to them via email. If a person phones me, then there's a higher likelihood that I'll discuss with them their feelings or emotions. Now, of course, if 100 people phone me every week, then I don't want to answer the phone either. and you need to feel about that. Why would you want to go to the phone every single time and not be involved in your own life? Can you see there would have to be some addictions involved in that? So whenever you find yourself in the situation where you're doing things for other people but not questioning why, or what's the long-term benefit for those things, then my suggestion is to re-look at those desires and passions that you think you have. Does that make sense? Now, for many of us, our lives are getting busier and busier with mundane tasks such as Facebook, internet access, email. Now, 50 years ago, none of us had those things. And yet we still survived. And most of the time, we actually enjoyed our lives. Many of the people who can think back that far actually enjoyed their lives then to a fair degree, right? And in fact, many of times to a larger degree than what they currently do while they're doing all these things. And we've got to look at why we're so involved in all these technological things rather than having time for ourselves and time focusing on our own desires. So far I've covered two things about desires. The first one is that if anyone else is involved in the satisfaction of our desire, then we must question whether we're in an addiction or not. And two is that we must feel our own feelings when we do things. Because if we feel our own feelings, and there are any feelings of frustration, annoyance, or happiness or sadness or any type of emotion, we will find the linkage to that emotion and what we're doing, and we will be able to determine whether that is an addiction or not that we're following, or it is actually a desire that we're following. Now, when we follow our desires, the law of attraction will bring us events that purify our desire. Do you understand what I mean by that? In other words, what will happen is if I follow my desire to do something, let's say it's a desire to teach, and then I start teaching, and I'm very, very hooked into the happy feelings coming from my audience, then what will start happening is that I'll get a lot of unhappy feelings coming from my audience at some point, right? And then what I'll need to do is feel about that, feel about those feelings projected at me. And if it impacts upon my desire, then it's a very good indication that I was previously in an addiction. Because the reality is you will not need anybody to listen to you, emotionally need anybody to listen to you, and when you don't need anybody to listen to you, more people will listen to you. That's part of the law of attraction. Does that make sense to everyone? And we need to allow ourselves to see when we are in addictions with our desires and then get them purified. So when I got, let's say I did start teaching and I got an audience and one audience got, you know, a little bit upset with me, or there are a few people who seemed really resistive in the audience and they didn't want to do the tasks involved, or they weren't listening, or they were distracted all the time, or they were using their phone all the time and all those kind of things, then if I feel my emotions and release those emotions that are triggered under those circumstances, the next time I do the talk, my desire to teach will be more pure than the last time I give the talk. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Okay.